All right, good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to learn a career as a translator, and we have Amy from Verbio to teach us what this career is all about. But before that, let's do a check-in. As you know, you need to check in so that your teacher knows that you're in this event and not anywhere else. If you have questions, you can use this great questions document and you can reference that. And then this one is the evaluation form. This is how we give you credit. And you need this for attendance, and you need this to graduate in high school. Be fully present, ask questions. You can turn on your camera. You can ask questions in the chat or raise your hand or just speak up. And then the evaluation again, make sure that you submit it right after the event so everything is still fresh. So that is it for me. Let's have Amy.
Hey guys. I don't know, it's telling me that. Hey, thank you guys all so much for coming. Pretty excited to be here. This is my first student outreach, so please be kind. I'm gonna go a little bit with the slide and a little bit of talking, but mostly talking because that's the part I'm really good at. So the first thing I really want to talk about is I'm going to do a little bit of talking about like what it is, maybe some industry jargon, and then a little bit about my business, where I work, what we do, and then kind of the career path that you can take and some resources and things to think about. So the first thing I want to talk about is translation versus interpreting. Very commonly, we get this blanket like I need translation. Translation is the written word, and interpreting is labeled as the spoken word. These are two very different language professions that I find most people are very good at one or the other. And it's very hard at a professional level to have the competency in both without a long period of time, right? So that is something to think about a little bit as you're kind of exploring like what you would think a career in language would be, because I guarantee it is not what you probably think it is. And that's kind of what I want to talk a little bit about today is what it is like in all the different ways language is available to us, right? Because I'm sure everyone started to notice, I know when I was a kid, and probably some when your teachers were a kid, any packaging that we got for a product was obviously all in English. But now we're starting to see, you know, very commonly that like kids' toys, everything is now in another language. And that's huge. I feel that language really builds a bridge of communication. And I, liking people, want to be able to communicate with everybody. Like for me, that is super important. I also believe that people should have equal access to language. And that is, you know, and the more products I see that are doing that, like that's a small thing. You know, my dream would be next that we would have stop signs that are multilingual. That would be amazing. I mean, think of all the ways right now where bilingual and additional language, 5 additional languages would really help pull people together. So that is one thing. Let's see if I can show a fun little slide. Well, or a fun few little slides. Let's see, it's a little timing. So translation and interpreting as a profession. There, translation versus interpreting. So who we are and what we do. I help people communicate what's your superpower.
Amy,
it didn't show, did it? Okay, well, that made me seem less cool, but at least you didn't get to see. So the first thing I wanted to do is who we are and what we do. And I help people communicate, and we feel that that's a superpower. So what we do here in our office is we help companies communicate in a global market. There are lots of different areas that communication is important, right? I think a lot of people are most familiar with perhaps like the medical interpreting or translation. That's most common, right? Another area that's really common is like legal and documents and stuff like that. But we do so much more than that. Like I said, communication is huge. If you can't communicate to your appropriate market, then, you know, that can be a lot of problems and stuff like that. So here in our office, we work with a lot of big companies. Those are some of the things I'm going to talk about, because I want to also explain a little bit about like the different types of projects we have. Because like I said, most people's understanding of language services is very small, and it's actually huge, just beyond huge. So let's see if we can get our next slide up here. And go through my notes. There it is. Oops. There we go. Okay. Can you guys still hear me? Thumbs up? Good. Perfect. Okay. So one thing I want to talk about a little bit is interpreting and all the different areas. Whoops. Let's take it back. So sorry. Okay. Well, we'll just ignore my notes. We can still see it. Okay. So interpreting is the spoken word. Like I said, most people we think of hospitals and medical second. We also think about like in the courtroom, right? If there's someone up on stand or something like that. But also some other really important places that we may not think about. Well, maybe we're thinking about it more right now based on what's happening in our world, right? We've gone, so diplomacy is a huge area where interpreting is a very valuable skill to have. Because obviously right now we're in a conflict that's consuming all parts of our world, right? Where, you know, Ukraine, our hearts go out to all these people. And how does diplomacy happen, right? You need an interpreter. And I think one popular misconception is just because someone is bilingual means that they encompass the skills needed to do the professional job. And that's simply not true. Diplomacy, for example, has a very specific language, right? It's not this simple conversational that we're having right at this time, right? They're talking about tariffs, and they're talking about banking, and they're talking about resources, and they're talking about so many things like that. And there are specific words, just like when you're writing an English paper, right? And your teacher's asking you about word choice, right? Like, you chose this word, could I have chosen a better word? And that is what a big part of what language is. It's not just using any word, it's using the right word, right? Because if someone misinterpreted like export, and we all know, for example, Spanish has so many, depending on how it's used, many different word choices. And you got to make sure you're using the right word, right? This is how wars can get prevented, and this is how wars can get started too. So that's really something to think about. That leads us a little bit into international trade and business, which ties a lot with our conference interpreting. So I'm going to use a little bit of like some real world examples and some work that our work actually does. So for example, I'm sure we can all think of local companies in our area that are global, right? Global impact, right? Like we can think of Intel, we can think of Columbia Sportswear, we can think about Nike, right? So they have a need because they have customers, and they have suppliers, and they have buyers. And these are all part of the international business and trade that they're doing. And so how do they communicate with them? Well, for example, they need someone on site who can provide language skills for them, right? So one real life example that we use, one of my favorite things that I get to do is that for Nike, when they have their buyers who are coming in from overseas to look at product lines, we provide interpretation services for that. So we have some very specialized individuals who've made part of their career choice to be proficient in that industry, and they come and help explain products, how they're made, why they're picking this color, why they want this product, what they think is going to do. And then, we assist with that. So it's super important for them to be able to find a way to communicate. That kind of just leads us a little bit into what we call conferences. And some of those are training. Like, for example, I'm sure you've heard of marquee spas, right? Hot tubs. I guess maybe everyone would probably like to look at me a little bit more talking instead of some static pictures. Conference interpreting is where you're having a large group in a large meeting place with multi-language needs. Marquee Spa is, for example, they have one of their factories located here in Oregon. And so they are obviously marquee. Any guesses in language? French. So so they have a lot of people coming and they have to do factory tours. Maybe they're doing a training for their employees and stuff like that. So there's a whole level of event planning that even goes into these large events, business meetings, all kinds of stuff. It's not just simply, well, for the interpreter is simply showing up, but for us, we have to do all that planning in advance. So those are things like, maybe we're going to need equipment for something like that. Maybe we're going to need a sound booth for something like that. There are all these other pieces that go into it. That's one of my specialties. I love large event planning. I love figuring out how to problem solve. So that's what kind of makes this really great. So we're going to hit the next slide a little bit. Let's see if I can make that bigger. So sorry. Like I said, I was very transparent in the beginning. That technology is not my strong point.
So if you have time for a question while you start
Yeah.
that, so how fluent do you have to be to interpret? Like, what's the level that you would say?
Okay. Well, I think it varies. And that is one thing that we're going to talk about a little bit, is that, like I said, I want to kind of demystify that whole idea that just because of being bilingual is a great starting place. And that is a super important part. So a lot of times, like interpreters, for example, what you've become proficient in is being able to, and there's two different skills about that. There's something called consecutive, which is a relay style. We all know the telephone game, right? I speak, you speak. So consecutive is the concept where I'm going to speak, then the interpreter is going to interpret it and then re-speak it to the next person down the line, which can happen in business settings. Simultaneous interpreting, which is a highly specialized skill and is being able to turn that brain to hear the English in and to project, we'll say, French out at the same time. So just like any career that you pick, sometimes we go in being, like we only have a base level understanding, right? But it's practice and time and commitment that can change the skill level, right? So, and a lot of these things, like say you have an upcoming, like a lot of this work is done freelance, which I can talk about a little more, but say you have a job coming up, right? Like, for example, I have a job for, we'll pick Nike. Okay. We're just going to use that one. Sorry. So especially if like that is not your brand, we're just going to use Nike because that's my experience. So usually one thing that we ask is for reference materials. Do you have websites? Do you have information? Because it's really important for us to do the best job we can at anything. We have to be prepared. And these skills are no different, right? Like, let's say you don't have a huge apparel jar, like you don't have that big vocabulary. That's why we ask all of our clients to give us, some material in advance, right? Then you have that time to prepare for that. So I think that is the biggest thing, is that is just like anything, we're always working to hone our skills, right? I want to be better today than I was yesterday. And I'm going to do the things that I can to make me better tomorrow. And it's just being willing to be open to opportunities and be willing to try. I think that is the biggest thing. Sometimes fear can get in the way of what we want to do, but I'm sure you guys, I always refer to this. I don't know if you guys have seen, We Bought a Zoo. Does anyone know that movie? I don't know if you remember something very profound he said in there. He said, you only need 20 seconds of courage. 20 seconds is the time it takes for that adrenaline to run out, and then we can accomplish anything. So I think the most thing that we need to be open to is just trying and being willing to maybe fail a little bit, get a little dusty, and jump right back on the horse. So sometimes, like when we have those big conference interpretings, let's say there's like, and I think a lot of it is got at this level of communication. So I may know someone who's a really strong interpreter I've worked with for a very long time, but I know someone that doesn't have quite those skills. They want those skills. I would pair them together in an environment so that they can kind of get a little bit of that I see your question, on the job training, so that their skills get better, right? If we have someone who's really good, we can pair them together. So I'll digress and I'll go right to that question. So what is my position and and who do I work for? So I work for a company called Verbio. We used to be called Oregon Translation. We're located right here in Beaverton. My job is very complex because we're a small office. For today, I'm wearing the outreach coordinator. I do project management work. I actually, and maybe this is a great discussion, guess I have a language that maybe people don't think is a language. And my language is numbers. And there's an ongoing discussion about whether numbers is actually a language. Maybe that's a conversation you guys want to open up. What is language? What qualifies as language? My role mostly is numbers. So that's what I do. I do a lot of bookkeeping. I do the accounting and stuff like that, but I do project management as well. So our office is mostly project managers. We don't necessarily have in-house linguists that we use here because the work we do is a lot of it is very specialized, right? And that's the important thing I want to see is that there are very few people who are a master in all areas, right? If I have a project coming up, for example, that is heavy with a marketing tone, I am not going to send it to a translator whose skill set derives in weapons and mechanics and engineering, right? I'm going to send it to a marketing person. Just like when you guys go to college and they have all those different subjects for you to major in, there's a reason for that, right? Because we're getting in a very specialized skill set. So language you should think of should be in addition to something else, right? A career path in language is important, right? You have to have all that schooling because there is a high level of this. And that's why bilingual language skills isn't enough, right? Because if you're going to write a paper, even when you're writing in English, there are a lot of things you got to know, right? You got to know where punctuation goes. You got to know the spacing. You've got to know the correct tone to use it. So we're adding that skill set and we're adding a language skill on top of that, right? So like, for example, you're really into biochemistry. That's great. You add the language to that too, right? Because that just opens so many more doors for you. That's the important thing I really want you guys going into this is that there are so many different like specialties to this, that it's not like you may be going to school for language, but you're going for school language and, right? Like I have a drive for business. So I want to go into business management. But I would like to work with a company who works overseas, right? Like that, like say that's my dream. So we're doing business and language, right? You can specialize in language, which is really important, but but I find that it's best if you also have an and, because it is very specialized. Like that example I used before, like one of our customers, for example, I know everybody knows this company, or maybe you don't, and maybe this is going to surprise you. If you've heard of Flir Technologies, right? Flir. How many people watch National Geographic? A lot of people probably watch National Geographic. Who doesn't like looking at animals doing cool things in nature? So if you've ever noticed when they are doing the night vision, they will always pan to the camera and there's always a logo on there and that says Flir. Flir is located here in Wilsonville. What they do is they develop infrared cameras. But Flir does two types of cameras. They do the public facing one, which is you're going to see on the National Geographic. They also have a private sector where they work with the military directly. So there is that additional piece. So like I said, when I have people, that's a very highly specialized skill to be able to have that technical jargon, to be able to rewrite manuals for the operation of these particular cameras, right? Like we are actually getting ready to send Flir supplies cameras to the military, our military, right? Though you can't get the same things, but you can go to Flir and buy infrared camera, but you're not getting the same technology. So we have that technology is actually all over the world. We send engineers that have the language skills to go overseas to train the engineers there. So those are a lot of things to think about. I guess people probably didn't really, aren't too familiar with all the exact things that how language fits like that. It's like it's a two-part thing. Does that answer the question a little bit? It gives you a little bit more insight into exactly what I do. So we talked about interpreting. We kind of worked a little bit on translation. Let's see if I can get this slide going for us so we can take a look at some examples of translation. Okay. All right, I'm going to share this screen because it's going to give you okay, hold on just 1 second. Thanks, guys. Okay, sure. So these are some examples of some translation. This is the written word. So we're moving from the spoken word into some of the written word. So for example, we see all kinds of things like signage. Super important in an industry to have signage. Facebook is multilingual. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Sony PlayStation, for example. This is a content label that I'm circling up here. For example, when you go to, when you go to Columbia Sportswear, for example, this is actually a project we worked on. The hang tags that hang from the jackets that are in multi-languages that talk about how you care for your fabric, and those tags that are in the back of your jacket, that's actually our work. For example, you can go and see a real life project of one of the things that we do. So that's kind of exciting. But I mean, there are things like books need to be translated. Simple things like that. I want to show you a little bit about this one is, I think, kind of interesting. It's called localization, right? This is where we really get into all the different types of things. Localization, oh, it shows right there. Well, that's no fun if you can read what I'm going to say. Right? So localization is the process of adapting a product or a content to a specific locale. For example, Spanish is not just Spanish, right? Spanish is very regionalized. Here in the US, our easiest reference is we hear a little bit of like a dialect or language, right? Like maybe you can pick up on my accent a little bit. Maybe you can't. I've lived here for a long time, but I'm actually from the Northeast, right? So you get around my folks and you're really going to hear that Downeaster come out. Spanish is just like that. Spanish is just like that. So it's very important that when companies are putting products in the market, that they not only, they have to have the consideration of the audience that it's going to. Mexican Spanish isn't necessarily going to work well in Argentina. Some of it will, but some of it's not going to. Those are really important factors. So localization is also things like taking into consider the target market, currencies, right? Like even if I'm doing different parts of the world use different kinds of currencies. When you're adapting a translation or you're doing something like that, that's something you have to take into consideration as well. Dates, phone numbers, those are all those things because we don't want a cultural, as we're familiar with, something to go wrong, which is usually generally always what happens. So let's see. go, hold on one second. We're going to go to the next slide. So let's take a look at something that's kind of fun for us to think about. So it's called transcreation. I'm sure you guys can all see this. And I don't remember if they actually ended up doing this in the US, but these were products that were actually not released for the US market. So we see these variations that they have decided to take on the burger, right? They're selling it to different markets. So one thing that's very interesting is that black burger bun was made with squid ink, right? Super common in other parts of the world, but how would we take that, right? How would that be something a US market would probably embrace or celebrate? No, probably not. But, you know, in a foreign market, that is a cultural adaptation, right? Like they make green tea Kit Kats. They don't make those here, right? So that's why a lot of times when we go to different parts of the world, we're seeing similar, right? Like a Royale with cheese, right? We don't got the Royale with cheese, for example. All those things, those are really important things. That's what transcreation is. It's a level of having an understanding of the culture of the area you're going into and what would be acceptable, right? Like not everything is going to, is very appropriate for that kind of stuff, which can result in a lot of kind of mismatches, right? For example, so, which I'm sure we can all think of several of those. Like car companies are notorious for not checking the cultural content. So an example of one thing that we do, one kind of project, is that clothing companies, for example, they make different types of colors and they use different words for those colors, right? Like lavender could be called lilac, right? We have an example of one where a company was testing Portland gray in the international market, right? So companies come to us with the idea of what a color is, and they want it in several different languages, right? Like we want it in Swedish, and we would like it in Japanese, and we would like it in French. So we take those colors with the names that they've thought of, and we test the market. So we will reach out to translators that are that have come from their native countries, still have close contacts, and we're like, hey, this is what this company is proposing. Can you let us know if these colors are appropriate? Is this word appropriate? What is the cultural meaning of that word? How would that work well in the area? Because like I said, for example, so when you see the product on the streets and you say, oh, Portland gray, I heard about that. So Portland gray was a color that a local company here had chosen. They're like, we want to see if Portland gray would be, if we took it overseas, would they know what Portland gray is, right? And we all, like, even here in our office, kind of doubted that, right? We thought, there's no way. So we tested it. We tested the market to see what it would be, and come to find out, people actually, of course, discover that the Pacific Northwest is gray. And of course, Portland gray, they knew exactly what that meant, because they think we live in a gray area, and it worked. So they decided to take the color to market like that. So pretty interesting stuff. Okay, oh, that's my fun slide. We're not there yet. Hold on one second. There we go. We're going to do this one. This is something that we probably are becoming a little bit more familiar with, that we haven't been. We were just talking about that a little bit in advance. Voiceover and subtitling. This is also a career choice for this. We have seen a lot of this nowadays, more than we ever see, right? Thank you to the power of, well, you can tell when this slide was made because YouTube was super popular. Now we've moved beyond YouTube, but one example I wanted you guys to think about is Netflix. I'm sure you all remember when Netflix first started, there was hardly any content from other countries. And now there is tons of content, from other countries, and two, our content is being translated and interpreting. And I'm sure you guys are noticing that they do it a bunch of different ways, right? Sometimes they do subtitling. And I could go into a long about the complexities of subtitling, but you're also noticing that some are doing voiceover, which you guys may think of as like dubbing, right? They take a voice and they do it over that. But it's actually, it's way more complex than that. But one thing is like a client will come to us and they will want a voiceover, or they want dubbing. And there, once again, we go back to this cultural consulting aspect of it, which is sometimes a client is specific about a gender they want, or an age range they want, or a dialect that they want. Those are all important questions that make it all very valuable. Let's see. Okay. Let's see what's next. All right, we're going to go into, I'm going to skip that slide, but I want to do a fun slide for you. Hold on one second. As soon as it picks up, because my favorite part of this is this, and this is kind of what is super important. So it says, what is wrong with these images? So for example, you can see the language it was in, and then the language it was translated into, right? No smoking is somehow we ended up with no naked flames. So I'm sure we all see this more than we are aware. It doesn't happen so much here in the US, but it does happen in lots of other places across the world. And why do things like that happen? And the reason things like these happen is that they are not taking it to the professionals. So what they're probably doing is Google Translation, right? And I'm sure all of us have been guilty of using Google Translation from time to time. But one thing I'm going to ask you to do though, next time you put something into Google Translate and it gives you a translation, back translate it. Put it back in the search engine, put it back in the front and see if the English comes back out. And I think your results are going to surprise you a whole lot. One thing that people ask quite a bit is about AI technology. Google does use an AI technology for translation, right? And we're starting to see that come up more and more and more again. The problem that we're currently having with that is the fact that it is actually unregulated and it is not fact checked. So Google is not, it is a learning software. Now AI is learning. However, it's not going back in and relearning, or it's not, there's no one correcting it to know that it was wrong. Right? We're just data dumping into it right now. Because like I said before, there's all these different tones, right? If I'm using a marketing tone, AI is not able to pick up the importance of those things. Whoops. So it's not able to understand tone. It's not able to understand legal. It's just not there yet. And so everyone's always like, they're a little worried. How is that going to affect the industry? How are things going to go? I think the important thing to realize is that we are just like, I guess one of the things to think of is like chess, right? When they were first testing AI with chess, there was one thing that it wasn't able to do, right? The complexities of language are so far advanced and they keep testing humans against machines. And the translators are coming up on top every time. And there's a reason for that. It's because they're not able to exhibit tone. And language skills is an art. It's not a science. It's not 1 + 2 = 3, right? There's way more things that go into that, word choice, all those kinds of things. So I wanted to give you a little bit about that and help all your teachers out when they are like, did you just run this through Google Translate? Back translate it, double check your work. So really the reason, so these are just some real world ideas of where language is every day. So really what you guys want to know is what's a career look like? How do I get from having this passion or this interest, and how do I bring it all together, right? And that's an important thing for you to understand. So just one second. And I'm going to bring up this slide for you. And I'll even leave the words at the bottom in case you get tired of me talking. So there are some skills that we have in unison between a translator and an interpreter, and then that's where they branch out a little bit. So some things that are important: formal language training and a college degree, excellent research skills, lived in 2+ countries, specialized knowledge of subject matter, and basic business skills. So see, you're like, I didn't even know that these were things. The reason the 2 countries is like I was talking about, but don't see, like these are just some general ideas, but I don't want you to think that these are a barrier that's going to prevent you from wanting to do what you want to do. Because one part of my job, I guess I should have told you, is I do vendor recruiting. So I am looking for the language talent all the time. Like we will get a new project in a subject matter we have not possibly seen before, right? Like when we first started doing high-tech manuals, right? That is not a skill set for everyone. I needed to find those resources. So I have a very strong believing in the diamond in the rough idea, right? So say you have really strong language skills, things like that, and you want a career, there are ways that you can start it at any point, right? College is a great place to get all this stuff, but I also don't rule out the individual that just came here perhaps on a refugee status, who has really strong language skills, who wants to help their community. How do we help them become the professional they need to be, right? So that's also something to keep in mind. College is an amazing place to help hone those skills, and just learn beyond your imagination. There are always other ways too. So those are some of the basic things that anyone would need who wanted to go into language or has it, but it kind of breaks down a little bit from there, right? Because like I said from the beginning, it's not necessarily a skill people can be super perfect in both. It's hard. It's a hard thing to be able to have your brain go on and off, on and off. So some other things, a translator works a lot digitally, right? They're using a lot of the documents. A lot of that stuff is just sent through email, we use project managers, but that's all that kind of stuff, right? So it's very good, very important to have that kind of refined language skills. So spend long periods of time sitting in front of a computer. Hey, we're all pros at that now. Word processing skills, time effectiveness. And as you can see, interpreters have a little bit. One of the pluses that, maybe we didn't get to talk about is that interpreters get to travel quite a bit too. That's what makes that job really fun. Quick thinking, spontaneous, able to work in stressful situations, outgoing and self-assured. These are not things, trust me, that are deal breakers. Because, for example, you may not feel that you are, come on, slide. Okay. Whoops. Went right by the one that you guys are actually most interested in. Let me pull that one back up. Careers using language skills. These are just some examples of careers, but I could go all day on all the different ways I see that. So a translator, interpreter, you can be a diplomat or a foreign service officer, international trade, importing, exporting, and logistics, hospitality, travel writer, tour guide, flight attendant, internees, teachers, agriculture. I mean, the need for language is grown far beyond our imagination. So there's one more. Useful websites. These are some of the resources that are available to help. The ATA, the National Council of Interpreting in Healthcare, Certified Commission. These last two, Oregon Society of Translators, Interpreters, and the Northwest Society of Translators and Interpreters, those are just local groups that are that they have collected. I mean, it's just like they have groups for everything, right? So this similar idea. These are people who are language professionals. They have groups, right? And they're able to talk to each other, teach each other. They have board meetings. They have websites where people can find resources and translators and stuff like that. So those are super important places too. The American Translators Association, that is where we find a lot of resources as well. They test individuals and stuff like that. So that is mostly the presentation that I have. Kind of opening it to see if there are some questions, if it helps you understand what possibly a career path would be. What are the job tasks? How much contact with other people, indoors, outdoors? Great question. Thank you so much for asking. So job tasks vary depending on what the role is. So where did that go? Oh, I don't have my chat thing open. Oh, look at that. Look at all these things. Don't forget to check the questions. Do you have to be very fluent in a language to interpret? So fluency, sorry, I didn't see these are all popping up. I have my chat off. So we're going to address all these things. Do you have to be very fluent in language to interpret? And the answer is yes, you have to be fairly fluent. But one thing that I did emphasize, and I will emphasize again, is that you get better with time, right? Not everyone goes into the job as the COO, right? Most people don't. Some people do, but most people don't. You got to get there, right? So you may have good fluent skills and the practice is going to get it better. And that's what's great about some of those local groups here is that that's a great place to kind of be around other people who are in your industry and they can give tips to each other. One thing I really like about is that this is a people business. There is no way at the end of the day, it's not a people business. If you're a translator, you get out of that people aspect a little bit. So let's see, do you also work with international movies that need translation or subtitled? And yes, we do work on some of those. So we've done some movies, but we do a lot of ads. We do a lot of campaign work for stuff like that, like the Oregon Health Authority. If you were to get on their website right now and you would see it in multiple languages, that's an example of our work that we do. Do we get videos from customers who need either subtitling or voiceovers? Yes, we do. We do that work. We pretty much can do anything you can imagine with language if customer asks for it. That's what's great about my job. It's not always the same every day because we may be working on, and we have a lot of different departments too. So some departments are working on our audiovisual products, which is those videos, the subtitling. Right now he's working on prompts for an IVR system. We have like a translation department. We have an interpreting department. So we have all those things. How many languages does our company offer? We offer over 200 languages and we will find the language if we don't have it. That's my job, which can sometimes be a challenging job. So we have, like in our area, we are a refugee city. If you guys are not aware of that. So that means we have a constant influx of different languages and different groups of people all the time. So what we do is sometimes there are not language professionals yet. I need to find them and I will search. Our company is a benefit company. I don't know if you guys know what that means. I'm sure if you shop at New Seasons, it's on the bag, but what does that mean? It means we do people, planet, profits in that order. People, planet, profits. So people first. So we will look here in our local market to find resources and that we would need for a particular project. Then I would move outside the Portland metro area to the state. Then I'm going to move to the West Coast. Then I'm going to move to the US before I move out of our area. That's just one thing that's super important to us. So, and it can be a challenge because, for example, we have a Marshallese community here. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the Marshall Islands are. It's in the middle of Pacific Ocean. And there are only 20,000 people in the whole world that speak Marshallese. 20,000. And I have to find one or two or three who is a professional language skills, right? This can be a hard task sometimes. So, but that's fun. How and why did you choose this profession? So we did go over my job title a little bit. Thank you so much for asking questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to them as we were going. So how and why did I choose this profession? So, because I said a little bit, I do project management and stuff like that. How did I choose this? Well, I think it chose me. It was kind of weird. How did I choose this? Well, there was just, when I see, this is where things grow. I just came here as a bookkeeper. Like I just didn't have super strong language skills. I came in here to do it. I've actually been here 8 years. I do so much more than that now. I do looking for the vendors. I can help with the documents, the very large ones. I can do those event plannings and stuff like that. And so why do I stay is because I think language is super important. I actually think it's a human right, if you were to ask me personally. So I have such a strong passion for for language, for communication, for being able to, communicate to people where they are, right? I think that is, I think that's really important. I think sometimes we have to step back so that we can step forward. Sometimes we need to. So that's kind of, so do I have contact with people? Some days I have a lot of contact with people. Like today, you guys are going to fill my cup of people. But some days I don't have a lot of contact with people. Sometimes our projects are outside. I did when Nike relaunched the Just Do It campaign. They had people all over campus. I had interpreters who were walking on campus who were assisting people and stuff like that. So I think that it just really depends on what you think your strong points are. And if you guys need to reach out to me after, I'll make sure she has my contact information and I can talk to you guys more because I don't want to, we are going to run out of time. So one thing about translators and interpreters is that there are some businesses that hire them directly, right? Like hospitals are hiring Spanish translators and you're a staff translator, right? But also the other side of our industry is that it is a subcontracted position, right? I'm sure your teachers can help explain that a little bit more. So what you do is you are taking on work as an individual, right? You are partnering, like I said, I have vendors. So I partner with translators, but they're free to work for any company they want to find work. So one important thing is that you to be able to manage your time well, to be able to know what your capabilities are, and do stuff like that. But the advantage of having your own, running your own business, being your own boss is that you get to make the hours that you want and you can do different things like that. So there are definitely two different ways to go. I have a fella here who came out of college and that was like his career path was to be a project manager to work at a translation company, right? And he followed that career path, went and got his master's and stuff like that. But there are also other paths too. Like I said, if you have two different like a language and then something else, like Nike needs marketing, for example, right? So having those language skills, that understanding really helps with your job for them as marketing and stuff like that. How can students do now to prepare for this career? I think the best thing that you can do to prepare, that's a really good question. I think there are lots of ways you can do to prepare. To prepare. And I know, and I really like that question, and it's a really deep dive because I'm sure all of you guys right now, you're like, I'm barely finishing high school. We've been kind of where we're at for a few years. How can I even know? And what I want to do. I think it's where you start with what is your passion, right? Like if you, and if you have a strong desire for a language, right? Because I see people, it may not be, like I'm totally American. Like my heritage is Irish, right? So it's not like, maybe you have a cultural background that makes you drive for something like that. Maybe you have a big interest in film and stuff like that. But I think the best thing we can do to prepare is to just try to have a plan, like write down the things that you like or what your idea of what your future wants to look like and see how we can fit language into something like that. There are so many other ways than just, there are so many ways that language is part of everyday life. But I think that's the best thing. I think talk to your guidance counselor a little bit about what you're doing, what your plan for college is. It can be language can be a college path. It can also be a different path too. So I don't want people to think that you have to go to college for this. You don't necessarily have to go to college with this. You just have to have a strong desire to learn and a willingness to be able to resource a little bit to find those. Right. So, I mean, that's talking to someone like me who has seen, different kinds of things. Like I said, some of those groups have, are local. They would love to talk to kids about how we get to do those things. So I think really mostly this kind of stuff, how do you prepare it's a little bit of soul searching. Is this something that you're going to want to do to help people, right? I think you got to have a little bit of a desire to help people, but I mean, there are so many other things. So I don't know if that was the best answer, but it's a pretty good answer. Do we have any other questions? I kind of went over a lot of stuff. Did anyone's brains go?
Actually, like a duh moment, because I always think that language is your language. I didn't thought about the the clothing is a language, numbers is a language, and that was like a duh moment. It's like, oh yeah, it's a language.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes what the most amazing part is. And I think that's some of the parts that kind of blew me and are constantly taking me for a loop all the time, is all the different ways that we just don't think of language. For example, like we had this fellow who wrote a children's book and he wrote it in English, but it rhymed. And he wanted to put it into Spanish. And that's a very complicated thing to have to do. And that isn't always and that's not something people are thinking about when they write the book. They're like, I just want other people to read this book. But trying to find words that rhyme, like frog and log rhymes super easy in English. I don't think that frog and log in Spanish rhyme at all. So then the author of the book has to make choices. Do we want to translate it just as it is and decide that rhyming isn't important, but for the understanding, or are we going to decide that the rhyming is important and we're going to have to reword some of this book? And that was a tough one. The author actually didn't want to do it. They could not understand that. So what education or training is required to get started on this path? Well, I think training is more important. I think both of them are equally important. I'm not saying, so I think education, I think the first thing to do is to get into language. First of all, is if you think that you have a passion, you need to pick a language and you need to go with it. I think that's the hardest part, because you have to develop a high level of skills. Like a writer has a high level of English skills, right? So if you want to be, we'll say a Vietnamese interpreter, you've already got some language skills. The first thing you need to do is start learning the language and then branch out from there, right? Like, let's say you have a super passion for literature, then you're gonna end up spending time reading books in both languages, right? You're gonna learn to develop a tone, because tone is really important as well, right? You're not going to use the same, like, we're very conversational, we're very relaxed. But if I was a lawyer on the stand at a trial, I'm not going to be talking to you the same way, right? We're going to be using that. And that's the thing. There are some specialized areas that you can get into. Trade schools and stuff even have that kind of stuff too. I think it really just depends on what you see it's going. But could someone have a high school? They could. So, but that's the first thing you would do, is just start working on the language. People are not asking, did you go to X college or did you go to Y college or what's that? Because, for example, like court interpreting is, you get a certificate. They have their own type of certification if you just wanted to go into that legal industry, right? The medical profession, they have their own kind of specialized training and certification that you can get, that you can do in like 80 or 120 hours. So those are some easier ways maybe that you would like to just do that, and then you can learn what else is possible. So there are some specific places like that for legal and medical. General translations for kind of anything else, you can just go to college, you can go to trade school, you just master the language and you get talking, and the best part is to get around other people doing that. Community is huge, right? So I think that helps a little bit with that question, right? Cool.
All right, we are close to our hour. If you have more questions, just put it in the chat. Otherwise, we'll end 5 minutes early.
Woohoo! We get recess? No, I know I don't get recess either. Do you want to say hi? No, I have my dog here. We have a dog-friendly office, but he sleeps a lot.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording and you